My own brother said I would never make it. The day he called me changed everything sentence that stayed with me for years. Didn't come from a stranger. It came from my own brother. And the worst part is, he didn't whisper it. He said it right in front of everyone. My parents, my uncle, two of his friends sitting on the couch. Even my little cousin, who was too young to understand what was happening. We were all in my parents' living room that Sunday afternoon. The smell of barbecue still hung in the air. Plates stacked in the sink. Football playing quietly on the TV. It was supposed to be a normal family day. But one sentence changed the way I looked at myself for years. My brother leaned back in his chair, laughed, and said something that sounded casual to everyone else. But it cut deeper than anything anyone had ever said to me. He said, "Come on, we all know he's never going to make it." The room went quiet for half a second. Not long enough for anyone to stop him. Just long enough for everyone to hear it. Then someone chuckled. Someone else changed the subject, and the moment passed. But for me, it didn't pass. It stayed. Because when the person who grew up beside you believes you're a failure, part of you starts believing it too. And for a long time, I did. But what my brother didn't know that day was something I only understood years later. Sometimes the words that try to break you become the reason you refuse to stay broken. And the day he called me years later, that was the day everything changed. But to understand why that call mattered so much, you have to understand the kind of brother he was and the kind of person I was back then. Because growing up, my brother was the one everyone admired, and I was the one everyone quietly worried about. My brother Daniel was 2 years older than me. And from the time we were kids, it felt like life just worked better for him. School came easy, teachers liked him, coaches picked him first. He had friends everywhere. The kind of kid adults described as having a bright future. I was different. Not in the dramatic way, just in the quiet ways that slowly add up over time. I struggled in school, not because I wasn't trying, but because things just didn't click the way they seemed to for everyone else. Math felt like a foreign language. History was a blur of names and dates. Even reading sometimes felt like climbing uphill. Meanwhile, Daniel finished homework in 10 minutes and went outside to play. My parents tried not to compare us. But comparisons happen anyway. They happen in small moments. Why can't you focus like your brother? Daniel finished this already. Maybe you should ask him for help. And even though they meant well, every one of those moments built a quiet pressure inside me. By the time we were teenagers, the difference between us felt even bigger. Daniel became the guy everyone in town knew. He played varsity football. Won student awards. Had a group of friends. That seemed to grow every year. When he walked into a room, people noticed. When I walked into a room, most people didn't. I wasn't bullied. I wasn't hated. I was just background. The kid teachers forgot to call on. The one who didn't quite stand out. The one who sat near the window and watched the clock. And after a while, you start building your identity around those small things. You stop raising your hand. You stop volunteering. You stop expecting people to see something special in you, because if they haven't seen it by now, maybe it isn't there. By the time Daniel graduated high school, everyone expected big things from him. He got into a good college. Had scholarships. People shook his hand like he was already successful. I remember the graduation party. Neighbors came over. My dad was grilling in the backyard. Someone raised a glass and said, "Daniel's going to do big things." Everyone nodded. And I remember standing there wondering something I had never said out loud. What about me? What was I going to be? Because at that point, I honestly didn't know. When Daniel left for college, the house felt strangely quiet. My parents still talked about him almost every day. Phone calls, updates. Stories about his classes. Meanwhile, I was finishing my last year of high school, feeling like I was walking toward a future that didn't have a map. I didn't have a scholarship. I didn't have a plan. Most of my friends were applying to universities. Some were moving to bigger cities. Some already had internships lined up through family connections. I had a part-time job in a hardware store and a growing feeling that everyone else had started life. While I was still standing at the starting line, graduation came faster than I expected. One minute I was sitting in class. The next minute I was wearing a cap and gown, walking across a stage, shaking a principal's hand, hearing polite applause. No big speeches. No big announcements. Just another student moving through the line. After the ceremony, my family gathered in the parking lot. My mom hugged me. My dad clapped me on the shoulder. Daniel was home from college for the weekend. And that's When the conversation happened, the one that stayed with me for years, someone asked the simple question everyone asks graduates. So, what's next? It's amazing how heavy that question can feel when you don't have an answer. I hesitated. Then I said something honest. I'm still figuring it out. Daniel laughed, not in a cruel way, just casually, like he was pointing out something obvious. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. Yeah, he's been figuring it out for years. People laughed politely, and then came the line. The one that stayed with me. Come on, we all know he's never going to make it. Silence. Then someone changed the subject, but inside me something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a door closing somewhere deep inside my chest. Because hearing that from strangers is one thing, but hearing it from the person who grew up beside you, the person who shared your childhood, that hits differently. And from that moment on, I carried those words with me through every job, every decision, every late night wondering if he was right. But what Daniel didn't know that day was that life has a strange way of testing the words we throw at people. Because the future has a habit of turning quiet people into strong ones. And sometimes the person everyone doubts is the one who learns the most about persistence. Years later, my brother would call me, and his voice would sound different. Not confident, not certain, but something else. Something I never expected to hear from him. But that moment was still far away, because after that, graduation day, my life took a path that nobody believed in, including my own brother. After graduation, life didn't suddenly become clear. There was no big moment of realization. No mentor showing up with a perfect plan. No sudden burst of confidence. Just reality. And reality looked a lot less inspiring than the motivational quotes people post online. While my friends were packing for college dorms or celebrating new jobs, I was waking up at 5:30 every morning to open the hardware store where I had been working part-time. Only now it wasn't part-time anymore. It was my life. The store sat on the edge of town next to an old gas station and a diner that had probably looked the same since the 1970s. The sign above the door flickered at night, and the floor inside creaked in places where the wood had worn thin. My boss, Larry, had owned the place for almost 30 years. Larry was the kind of guy who rarely smiled, but noticed everything. The first morning I showed up after graduation, he handed me a set of keys and said something simple. "You sure you want the hours?" I shrugged. "I need the work." He nodded once. That was the entire interview. For the next year, my world became that hardware store. Most mornings started the same way. Flip on the lights, start the coffee pot. Unlock the doors, and wait. Some days were busy. Contractors coming in for supplies, homeowners trying to fix things they probably shouldn't, farmers buying tools that had outlived 3 generations. Other days were painfully slow. Hours would pass with only 1 or 2 customers, and during those quiet moments, my mind would wander. Sometimes I thought about my brother. Daniel was doing well in college. My parents talked about him all the time. His internships. His grades. The professor who told him he had a real future in business. Every update sounded like another confirmation of something everyone already believed. Daniel was going somewhere. And me, I was standing behind a register selling hammers. One afternoon, about 6 months after graduation, Daniel came into town for a weekend visit. He stopped by the store. I remember exactly how that moment felt. I was standing behind the counter organizing receipts when the doorbell rang. I looked up, and there he was. Clean clothes, confident posture, the kind of presence that fills a room without trying. He looked around the store for a moment, then he smiled. Not a mean smile, but not exactly supportive either. More like the smile someone gives when they walk into a place that confirms what they expected. "So this is where you've been hiding," he said. I laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, something like that." He walked down one of the aisles, picking up tools and putting them back. "You still figuring things out?" There it was again, that phrase, figuring things out. Except now it sounded less like encouragement and more like a label. I shrugged. Working, saving money. Daniel leaned against the counter. "For what?" I opened my mouth, then closed it, because I didn't actually know. He nodded slowly, like my silence answered the question. Then he said something that didn't sound cruel at the time, but it stuck with me anyway. "You know, man, life doesn't just happen to you. You have to go get it." Then he patted the counter and left out. The bell above the door rang again as he walked out, and suddenly the store felt quieter than usual. For the rest of that day, I couldn't stop thinking about what he said, not because he was wrong, but because I wasn't sure how to prove him wrong. That night I stayed late at the store. Larry had already left. The lights buzzed softly above me, and for the first time in months, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding. What if he's right? What if this is it? What if the rest of my life looks exactly like this? Same building, same job, same routine. The thought scared me more than anything my brother had said. Not because the job was terrible, but because it felt like standing still while the world moved forward. I locked up the store and walked outside. The town was quiet, streetlights glowing over empty roads, and across the parking lot, the diner was still open, the same diner that had been there my entire life. Without really thinking about it, I walked over. Inside, the place smelled like coffee and fried onions. A few truck drivers sat in the corner. The waitress, Maggie, had known me since I was a kid. She poured coffee in front of me without asking. "You look like someone thinking hard," she said. I smiled weakly. "Maybe I am." She leaned on the counter. "About what?" I hesitated. Then I said something I had never said out loud before. "I think I might be wasting my life." Maggie didn't laugh. She didn't rush to comfort me. Instead, she asked a simple question. "What did you do today?" "Worked, and yesterday, worked, and tomorrow, probably work again." She nodded. "Well, that doesn't sound like wasting time to me." I frowned. She continued. "You know what wasting time looks like." I shook my head. "People waiting for a perfect moment that never comes." She wiped the counter slowly. "Working isn't the problem. Standing still in your mind is." Her words stayed with me long after I left the diner. Because for the first time, someone had looked at my life and didn't see failure. They saw potential movement. And that small difference changed something inside me. Over the next few months, I started paying attention, not just to my job, but to everything around me. Every customer, every conversation, every problem people walked into the store trying to solve. I noticed things most people ignored. Contractors complaining about supply prices, farmers needing tools that lasted longer, homeowners asking the same questions over and over, little patterns, little frustrations, little opportunities. Larry noticed the change. One afternoon, he watched me reorganizing shelves. "You planning to own the place?" He joked. I shrugged, just trying to make things better. He studied me for a moment, then said something unexpected. "You ever thought about business?" I laughed. "My brother's the business guy." Larry shook his head. "Your brother's studying business. That's different." He tapped the counter. "You're here watching how it actually works." That night I went home and did something I had never done before. I started reading books about small businesses, about supply chains, about how local stores survive when big corporations move in. At first it was slow, confusing, but the more I read, the more something clicked. The hardware store wasn't just a job. It was a living system. Customers, suppliers, needs, solutions. And suddenly the question in my mind changed. Instead of asking, "What am I doing with my life?" I started asking, "What could this become?" 2 years passed, then 3. To most people in town, nothing about my life looked different. Same job, same building, same quiet guy behind the counter. But inside, everything was changing. I saved money. I learned everything Larry knew about running the store. I watched how businesses failed and how a few survived. Meanwhile, Daniel graduated college, got a corporate job in the city. The kind of job that came with a suit and a business card. At family gatherings, people talked about his career. They rarely asked about mine anymore, which, strangely enough, stopped bothering me. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove something to them. I was building something they couldn't see yet. But 5 years after that conversation in my parents' living room, something happened that none of us expected. Something that would force my brother to look at me differently. And it started with a decision Larry made one quiet afternoon in the hardware store. A decision that changed my life forever. By the time 5 years had passed, most people in town believed they understood my story. The quiet kid who never quite figured things out. The guy who stayed behind while everyone else left. The one who never really moved forward. On the surface, they were right. If someone drove past the hardware store, they'd see the same old building, same faded sign, same creaky wooden floors. And if they walked inside, they'd still see me behind the counter. To them, nothing had changed. But the truth was, everything had changed. They just couldn't see it yet. One slow Tuesday afternoon, Larry called me into the small office behind the store. The office wasn't much. Just an old metal desk, a filing cabinet, and a dusty fan that hummed constantly. Larry sat down heavily in his chair and rubbed his eyes. He looked older than usual. "Sit down," he said. Something in his voice made me nervous. I pulled up the wooden chair across from him. He leaned back and looked at me for a long moment. "You've been here 5 years," he said. I nodded. "Feels longer." He chuckled softly. "Yeah, retail will do that to you." Then he sighed. "Truth is, I'm tired." That surprised me. Larry had always seemed like the kind of man who would run the store until the day he died. "I've been doing this 30 years, he continued, waking up before sunrise, closing after dark, watching big chain stores take customers every year." He paused, then looked straight at me. "I'm thinking about selling." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The idea of this store disappearing felt strange. This place had been my entire adult life. "Someone interested?" I asked. Larry shrugged. "A few people." He leaned forward. "Mostly developers." I frowned. "Developers? Yeah. They'd tear it down. Probably build apartments." Something about that idea felt wrong. Not just for me, but for the town. This hardware store had been here longer than most of the houses around it. Farmers relied on it. Contractors depended on it. Even people fixing small things around their homes came here for advice. It wasn't just a business. It was part of the town. Larry watched my face carefully. Then he said something that made my heart skip. "Unless someone else wants it." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean." I laughed nervously. "Larry, I can't buy a store." He crossed his arms. "Why not?" "Because I don't have that kind of money." He nodded slowly. "You've been saving though." My eyes widened. "How do you know that?" Larry smiled. "You think I didn't notice you skipping lunch some days?" He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "Truth is, I've been watching you for years." He slid the folder across the desk. Inside were financial papers, store reports, numbers I had seen 1,000 times, but never in this context. "You know this place better than anyone," he said. "You reorganized inventory. You improved supplier relationships. You increased contractor accounts." I stared at the pages. "You did that," he continued, without even realizing it. My head was spinning. "But buying it, that's impossible." Larry shook his head. "No, it's just difficult." Then he leaned forward. "And difficult things are usually worth doing." That night I didn't sleep much. The idea felt huge. Terrifying. Exciting. All at the same time. Could I actually do it? Buy the store? Run it? Turn it into something bigger? Every voice in my head said the same thing. "You're not that guy." And then another voice appeared. Quieter. But stronger. Why not? The next morning I walked back into the store with a strange mix of fear and determination. Larry was already there, drinking coffee, watching me. "Well?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "I want to try." He smiled. "Good." Then he said something that changed everything. "I'll help you." The next 6 months were the hardest of my life. Banks, loans, paperwork, meetings with people who looked at me the same way my brother used to, like I was someone who didn't belong in that room. Some said no immediately, some laughed politely. One banker even said something that sounded painfully familiar. "You don't exactly have a track record." But each rejection made me more determined. Because every night after those meetings, I came back to the store, and I knew something they didn't. I knew this place. I knew the customers. I knew what worked and what didn't. Finally, one small community bank agreed to listen. The manager sat across from me in a quiet office. She flipped through my proposal. "You've been working there 5 years?" "Yes." "You want to buy the business from the current owner?" "Yes." She looked up at me. "Why?" That question caught me off guard. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many. I thought about the town, the contractors, the farmers, the old building that had helped people solve problems for decades. Then I said something simple, "Because this place matters." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "Let's see if we can make this work." 3 months later, I signed the papers, just like that. The quiet kid who would never make it on the hardware store. The same store people thought I was stuck in. Now it was mine. Larry stayed on for a few months to help with the transition. Then one evening, he handed me the keys. "You did. Good," he said. I looked around the store. The same shelves, the same tools, the same creaky floors. But everything felt different. Because now, this wasn't where my life had stalled. This was where it was starting. Over the next 2 years, I worked harder than I ever had before. I expanded inventory. Built relationships with contractors, modernized the ordering system, launched a small delivery service for local farms. Slowly, the store began to grow. Customers returned. New ones arrived. The business started thriving, and word started spreading. The quiet guy from the hardware store had done something nobody expected. But the moment that mattered most, the moment that completed the story, didn't happen in the store. It happened 5 years later, on a quiet evening, when my phone rang and the name on the screen surprised me. Daniel, my brother. The same brother who once said I'd never make it, and the sound of his voice that night was something I had never heard before. The night my brother called, I almost didn't answer. It was late. The store had been closed for over an hour, and I was still inside finishing paperwork at the counter. The soft hum of the lights above me filled the quiet building, and outside the parking lot was empty except for my truck. My phone buzzed against the wooden surface. I glanced down. Daniel. For a moment I just stared at the screen. My brother and I hadn't really talked in months. Not because we hated each other. Nothing that dramatic. Life had simply moved in different directions. He was in the city building a corporate career. I was here building something nobody had believed in. Family dinners had become occasional phone calls. Phone calls had slowly turned into silence. So when I saw his name appear on the screen, I hesitated. Then I answered, "Hey." There was a pause on the other end. Then his voice came through. "Hey, man." Something about his tone immediately felt different. Daniel had always spoken with a certain confidence. Even when we were kids, he had this natural certainty in his voice, like he always knew exactly where he was going. But tonight, that certainty was gone. He sounded tired. "Did I call late?" he asked. "No," I said, leaning back against the counter. "I'm still at the store." Another pause. "The hardware store." I smiled slightly. "Yeah, the same one." He exhaled slowly. "I've heard a lot about it lately." That surprised me. "From who?" "Mom." "Dad." "Apparently half the town." I laughed quietly. Well, small towns talk. But Daniel didn't laugh. Instead, he said something that made me sit up straighter. "I drove by it last week." "You were in town?" "Briefly." I frowned. "You didn't stop by." "I know." Another silence settled between us. Then he spoke again. "Looks different." I glanced around the store. New shelves, better lighting, expanded sections for contractors, and farm equipment. The building had grown over the years, little by little. "Yeah," I said. "We've made some changes. I've got 6 employees now." There was a pause. Then Daniel said something I never expected to hear. "That's impressive." The word hung in the air. Impressive. Coming from anyone else, it might have felt normal. But coming from him, it meant something. Because my brother had always been the standard everyone compared me to. The one who succeeded. The one who understood the world. The one who said I probably never would. And now he was the one sounding uncertain. "Listen," he said after a moment. "Can we talk?" "About what?" "Life." I chuckled. "That's a big topic." "I know." His voice softened. "I just need someone who gets it." That was the first moment I realized something important. My brother wasn't calling to check on me. He was calling because something in his life wasn't working. "Where are you?" I asked. "In the car. Driving. Parked." "Good." I leaned forward on the counter. "What's going on?" He took a long breath before answering. "Everything I thought I wanted isn't what I thought it would be." I stayed quiet. "Sometimes people need space to keep talking." "My job is good," he continued. "The pay is great. The office is impressive. The company is respected. But every morning I wake up feeling like I'm running on a treadmill that never stops." I could hear traffic faintly in the background. "Promotions," he said. "Deadlines. Meetings about meetings. Everyone trying to get ahead of everyone else." He paused, "And the worst part is, nobody seems happy." That didn't surprise me, but hearing it from Daniel felt strange, because growing up, he had always believed success looked exactly like that. The corporate ladder, the big city, the impressive title. "I thought if I worked hard enough," he continued, "I'd feel like I made it." His voice dropped. "But I don't." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something that caught me completely off guard. "I've been thinking about something you said once." "I say a lot of things." "You said you liked working at the store because you could actually see the problems you were solving." I remember that conversation years ago. Before I bought the place, before anything changed. Yeah, I said. Daniel let out a quiet laugh. You know what I solve at work? What? PowerPoint slides. I smiled. He continued, and last week I realized something that scared me. What? I don't know if any of it matters. The honesty in his voice was raw, not dramatic, just real. I've been watching. What you've done, he added. How do you know what I've done? Mom talks. I chuckled. That explains it. He continued. You built something real. The word real carried weight. You took a job everyone laughed at, he said, and turned it into a business people depend on. I stared at the shelves around me. The same place where I once felt stuck. Now someone else saw it as something meaningful. I think I was wrong about you, Daniel said quietly. Those words landed heavier than anything he had ever said before, because he wasn't forced to say them. He chose to. You remember that night in the living room? He asked. Yeah, when I said you probably wouldn't make it. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, I remember. I've thought about that moment a lot. His voice softened again. I think I was really talking about myself. I frowned. What do you mean? I thought success had to look a certain way. And when you didn't follow that path, I assumed you were failing. He paused. But maybe you were just brave enough to build something different. I didn't know how to respond, because hearing that from my brother felt like the closing of a chapter that had been open for years. Then he asked something simple. You happy? I looked around the store. The shelves I had built, the business that had grown, the life that had slowly taken shape while everyone thought I was standing still. Yeah, I said honestly, I am. There was relief in his voice when he replied. That's what I wanted to hear. Then he laughed softly. You know something funny? What? When we were kids, I always thought I'd be the one teaching you how life works. And now I think I called the wrong brother for advice. I laughed too. Life's weird like that. We talked for another hour that night. Not about success, not about who had won or lost, just about life, real life, the messy kind that nobody has fully figured out. Before we hung up, Daniel said something that stayed with me. You know what the strangest part is? What? The person everyone thought was falling behind might have been moving in the right direction the whole time. After we ended the call, I locked up the store and stepped outside. The night air was cool, the town was quiet, and the old hardware store sign glowed softly above the door. For years, people had looked at this place and seen a dead end, a symbol of someone who never made it. But standing there that night, I realized something important. Success isn't always loud. Sometimes it grows quietly, slowly, in places people overlook. And sometimes the people who doubt you the most are the ones who eventually understand your journey the best. My brother once said I would never make it, but the day he called me was the day both of us finally understood what making it really meant.